Well, Mark and Matthew's gospel tells us that Jesus first called 4 partners in a fishing business. Simon, Peter, Andrew, James and John, as they were working by the seashore in Galilee, sometimes called Lake Tiberias. In Luke's account, right at the beginning, Jesus boards Simon's boat and asks him to drop his nets into the deep water. I'm sure you remember the story. Simon protested, of course, as he usually did, because they hadn't caught anything. But as he did what the Lord asked, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. Peter recognized at that time that he was a sinful man. And Jesus said, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people." So what did they do? They pulled up their boats on the shore, they left everything, and they followed Jesus. And the Lord had something for his disciples to do for him, and they were to go in a completely new direction with the boats up on the shore. And Jesus is calling his disciples today. The journey with him is where he wants to lead us. And he calls us despite our shortcomings. He actually believes in us even though we don't believe in ourselves. He is our teacher, and there's work to be done. So that's what happened at the beginning of Jesus calling the disciples. But now let's fast forward through 3 eventful and quite turbulent, tumultuous years, really. And we reach now John 21. And we're on Galilee again, on the shoreline. And Peter is with 6 other disciples, including James and John. And there's a boat involved once again. And before I continue with the story, let's remember that the resurrection has taken place. But it wasn't like our Easter day. For Jesus' rising from the dead was surprisingly low-key, really. He is appearing over a period of about 40 days before his ascension, wasn't with fanfare and choirs and inspiring preaching. The emerging joy at that time was actually much quieter. Remember how he just called Mary's name? How he appeared to the women and Peter at the tomb? How he walked quietly alongside 2 disciples along the Emmaus road? He emerged through locked doors in a house in Jerusalem. He appeared in Galilee. And whilst all this was happening, there wasn't any Alleluia chorus or vibrant and uplifting singing, no preaching. It was very quiet, really. And here we have the 3rd resurrection appearance in John's Gospel. And it was by the lake. And the story tells us how Peter had this encounter with the risen Lord, and it's what gave him his apostolic task. We know that Peter had failed his Lord. He denied him 3 times. He and the other disciples had witnessed the Lord's crucifixion as well. They'd watched him die that awful death. And even though he'd appeared to them in the upper room, it seems as though the good news hasn't really impacted the disciples in the way that we think, knowing all of the story and knowing all the rest of the letters in the Bible which unpack everything. So what now? The disciples were probably feeling, well, we know we've seen the Lord, but everyone's after us. And Peter must have been feeling such a failure when he'd been given something to do, he denied his Lord. And the only thing that Peter was good at was fishing. So Peter, the leader of the disciples, probably says with a sigh, I'm going fishing. I'm going back to my old trade, to the security of what I know. and his mates follow him as well. And it's interesting that even though that's what they're good at, when they go fishing, they don't catch anything. They'd been out all night fishing, not a bite. Well, it wasn't a bite, it was a net, wasn't it? And despite their experience, the disciples had all this talent in fishing, but once again they caught nothing. Now, it's tempting after our Easter celebrations, after the high of Easter, as we get back into our routine, to forget just what Jesus has done and to not rely on his transforming grace. We can return perhaps with dissatisfaction after all that's happened, go into our familiar routine and wonder whether the Lord will really use me because I'm not actually that good. And the truth is, we won't flourish as a Christian unless we walk with the Lord. And Jesus knows that. And I think this story is really important because after the darkness of the night, and I love the symbolism of that, the dawn breaks and Jesus appears on the shoreline and he offers the light of his word as he says, throw your nets on the right side of the boat and you will find some fish. And these disillusioned fishermen do as he says. They trust the Lord, and what happens? They land a huge catch. And it's as these disillusioned fishermen see what happens that something wonderful happens. Listen carefully, I want to say to you, after the crescendos of Easter have kind of died down, the anthems have subsided, watch out for the Lord. Now's when we need to be listening for his voice. That voice may come from a distance, but it will be relevant to your situation. Jesus will speak to you where you are because he wants you to be fruitful and obedient. Twice, Peter was called from his familiar way of life. Twice, Peter had to get out of the boat and leave the familiar behind him to obediently follow Jesus. And this second time, he actually had to face up to his past. And Jesus knew what he was doing here. And if you're depressed and you find it really hard to believe that things can change in the world, perhaps you look at the news every day and you think, it's all right, I'm celebrating Easter and I think I've got that faith, but how can I really make a difference? It may be that you're feeling full of shame because of things that have happened in your life in the past, or you're feeling unworthy, or you're feeling perhaps a bit of a failure. If you're finding it hard to embrace the gospel's radical truth, then Jesus is calling your name. And I want you to hear him calling your name this morning, because he has something for you to do for him. It may be in your home. It may be in your work. It may be in your volunteering, as Charlie said. Suddenly found that there was something for him to do. It may be in the church. It may be in your leisure. But Jesus has something for you to do. And the Lord called Peter, and he also called Saul in our reading from Acts. They are two very different people. Jesus used Peter's leadership in its rawest state and his boldness of character. And now he's using Saul too, and Saul's qualities. He calls him. And those two people, combined with the power of the Holy Spirit, enabled the birth of the church, enabled the work of the kingdom. So you may be feeling a failure. You may feel the Lord can't use you, but Jesus may have other ideas. Peter was called from being a fisherman to be a fisher of men, and then from being a fisher of men, he was then called to be a shepherd of the people. But first, he had to get his relationship with the Lord right. And this is why I think this is so special, this passage. It all starts with a question: do you love Jesus? That's the question. Do you love Jesus? If so, don't worry about what's going on in the world. Yes, we've got to pray for it. We've got to be concerned about it. But what's more important is whether you love Jesus and whether he is calling you, and he will give you something to do. It may be small, it may be large. Peter denied he is Lord 3 times. But Jesus gave him that assurance that if he loved him, there was something for him to do. The commentator Tom Wright said these words, I'll read them. The conversation Peter needed, but no doubt dreaded, transformed his denials into stumbling affirmations of love and loyalty, with Jesus' questions themselves being turned into commissions. Feed my lambs, tend my sheep, feed my sheep. Peter had a work to do. His life was to be transformed. He was to find his vocation. And rather than being randomly impulsive and a denier, he would become the rock on which Jesus would build the church and eventually give his all humbly, if we believe the traditions, by being crucified upside down because he did not feel worthy to be crucified like Jesus. Peter walked the way of sacrificial love. He possessed true humility, and he even gave glory to God in his martyrdom. Today we should be praying, or in the days ahead I should say, for a new pope. In the Roman Catholic tradition, they see the pope as the successor to Peter. And I'm sure many of us will be praying that the right person will be chosen. But it's actually not just about a new pope or a new leader in Methodism or a new leader for a Methodism school eventually. It's actually about you. It's about me. It's about this church. We should be praying for our future leaders. We should be praying eventually. We're going to miss Lansford dreadfully. We should be praying eventually we will find someone to continue the good work he's been doing. We should be praying that we'll be able to appoint the right families and communities worker. We might not be putting up white smoke when we find the right person, but we will be rejoicing. We have to pray. And there's something for you to do. Next year, we're going to find it tough as a church. We're going to be stretched, and your church needs you. And everybody's different. Saul's conversion was quite dramatic. His calling was quite dramatic. He didn't actually change direction. He kept going on the Damascus road, but he was given a new task. The disciples had to change direction where they were going. Saul was a zealous and righteous man, yet turned from an enemy of Jesus and his followers to an articulate, wise evangelist. His life was turned around when he saw the light, and he was, as I say, called to make an impact. And it was humbling and shocking, that encounter that he had with the risen Lord. But that proud and dangerous man became blind, humbled for a life-changing purpose. He came to be a source of light and encouragement to many. So God uses an impulsive failure, Peter, a zealous persecutor, Paul, ordinary men and women all those years ago to transform the world. Just think of the impact those disciples had. What's the impact we're going to have on the world? We all have different encounters, sometimes quiet, gradual, and pastoral, sometimes loud and sudden and dramatic, sometimes completely uniquely tailored to our own circumstances. Maybe that the Lord's calling you in a way that nobody else is being called. But he's got something for you to do. For your sake for the sake of others, for the sake of the church, and for God's sake. You may be called to be a pastor or a preacher or a church worker. You may say, "Oh, not me." That's what I thought all those years ago. There will be people in this congregation who will be in the ministry in years to come, or become local preachers, or serving the church full time. There may be others who are called to work in a voluntary capacity in their community or in their line of work, to shine for Jesus and make a difference. You may be just called to be a really good Christian friend, or a faithful parent, or a teacher of others. Whatever you're being called to do, I want to say this morning, don't miss your calling. Discern and test what the Lord is calling you to do. We never know how many years we've got. Let's make the most of every single day we have. God needs you, and the world needs you. And finally, as we approach the 80th anniversary of VE Day on Thursday, it's tempting perhaps to see those soldiers at the cenotaph in November as that ever-diminishing band of frail old men in wheelchairs. Yet we need to hear and remember their stories. So I close by telling you, one of Britain's last surviving West Indian World War II veterans has spoken of his time serving in Lincolnshire's dam busters. His name is Ralph Otley. He was just 19 when he left Jamaica to join the RAF in 1944. And he's saying that he felt it was his duty to help the mother country. He went to serve with the 617 Dam Busters Squadron and based at RAF Woodall Spa. And these are Mr. Otley's words. "I was a little boy from Jamaica flying in a Lancaster bomber." And now the 99-year-old shares how he originally wanted to be a teacher, but instead he became one of the 10,000 West Indians who travelled across the Atlantic to join the fight against Hitler. His vocation was different from what he expected. And yet that 19-year-old made a huge difference to secure our freedom. The world today is still starved of love, joy, and peace. Power is being abused, conflicts rage, the vulnerable suffer, people are crying out for justice. Greed, exploitation, and a lack of compassion lead people to feel helpless and unloved. And yet Jesus came to redeem all this, to shine a light in the darkness, to bring hope and recreation. And he calls you to partner with him. At 9:30 p.m. on Thursday, beacons and lamplights of peace will shine across the UK to commemorate Victory in Europe Day. But let us, as we remember, allow Jesus to conscript us to shine our light in the world today. Don't be tempted to say, "I'm going fishing." Rather say, "Do I love Jesus? Will I not let the routines that we get into lull us into inaction, but throw our nets out the other side, trust the Lord, and believe"? We're going to sing in a minute. Hear the call of the kingdom to be children of light with the mercy of heaven, the humility of Christ, walking justly before him, loving all that is right. Why? That the life of Christ might shine through us. Let's stand.